So Darktable 3.8 is out now. This video will take you through the main changes, new modules, changes in the GUI, and also some things that are starting to disappear or that have disappeared completely. I'm Nicholas, and let's go. Now, before starting, I'd like to say that all the changes are on the Github website, so you can peruse through all the changes here. There is an enormous list. I will just in this video go through the ones that I find the most interesting. So let's start the list. So we're told that the keyboard shortcut system has been entirely reworked and extended to allow us to control Darktable with other devices, for example, game controllers, MIDI devices, and we can also make use of mouse movements. So the keyboard shortcuts are used, defined with this button here, and we're told we will have to recreate all the shortcuts that we previously made. It's not something I use very much. I'm not going to go into any detail with that, but I'm sure if you use shortcuts or an editing device, I'm sure you'll be interested in exploring that. The second one we have is one of the big ones is we can now use the new Canon CR3 RAW files. I have a couple of examples here, and these will now open and they are fully integrated into Darktable. There has also been a complete reworking of the crop, rotate and grids now in Darktable 3.8. So we now have an icon down here which we can toggle with the keyboard shortcut G, which will allow us to use the grids on every single module. These grids can be changed, rule of thirds, or any other, if you want a golden spiral, for example, golden spiral, whatever you like. They can be flipped. I keep it on rule of thirds usually, and you can change the overlay color too. And this now is now in the general interface. The crop and rotate module has now become a crop module, and perspective has become rotate and perspective. So this can be very useful. It's actually more logical now, because in the general sense, if I can try and find my building here, there we are, we have this one. So let's set this back. I will, in the history stack, discard the history completely. Let's go back to how it was. So imagine you are editing this photo. Let's get rid of the grid. The idea behind Darktable is to get, first of all, a neutral, well-corrected image. That is the scene referred workflow. Neutral, well-corrected for colors, exposure, and also perspective, highlights, everything. And then in a second part of the process would go to the creative, the more artistic modifications. And it makes sense to go into rotate and perspective first. So we have the same, it's the same workings as before. We find the structure with this pen, and then we can manually decide whether we want to correct for verticals or horizontals. So here I'll correct for verticals, let's say. We can show the guides here as well, or down at the bottom. That hasn't changed. And we also have, which is really nice, automatic cropping. We didn't have that before, so it will automatically crop. Before you had to choose every time whether you wanted original or largest format. It was usually off. And here you can choose to have it on original format, and every time you use a module on any photo, it will actually work and recrop the photo automatically, which is something that you like. You also have the choice here when you get in the structure to control click or shift click if you want to have different choices. I did make a video on the perspective module if you want to go and see that if you're not sure how it works, but that now is automatic. You can rotate the photo too. So let's if I right click on that, usually I do it with a right click, and then you rotate, and you can set that as you like. Maybe this is fine for you. So the picture would be neutrally corrected like that, and then artistically the idea is later on in the process you could choose to crop square original format, and you could choose to crop and keep some parts of the photo and reject the others. So that is now the new organization of rotate, perspective and crop, which does make a lot of sense to me. Now, we're also told that we have a new demosaic algorithm that's been introduced. So let's say I go to this picture, which is from Fuji. And if you look at the demosaic options for Fuji, so we have the Markenstein 1-pass, 3-pass, and there's not actually that much in the for the Fuji files. If you want to see the different options, you'd have to move here. I have a Sony ARW file, and in the demosaic we have now a new one, which is the LMMSE, which is particularly suited to high ISO and or noisy images. Now, I don't really see, I think this is a very, very specialist option. I rarely see much difference in the demosaicing. I'm sure there are differences, and I'm sure this is an interesting option. I actually use Fujifilm cameras, so this option is not currently available to me, so I can't really test it out, but it's there, and that's new. Now, also in the big ones, in the color calibration tab, if you go to calibrate with a color checker, then we are told that the tool is now normalized patchwise in exposure to discard the effect of uneven lighting and fall off when shooting color checkers handheld on location. So we have an improvement there. Now, I do not own a color checker yet. I would really like to give this a go one day, so I will be looking out for a color checker. I might purchase one in the coming year to give this a test. But there we are, improvements. So in the color checker calibration. Now, we also have two brand new modules in Darktable 3.8. We have one called blurs here, which is it is scene referred, so it is physically accurate, and it will simulate motion blurs. So I'll go through this. I'll make a quick video to explain this, but it's quite easy to use. So we have different kind of blurs. Let's put the blur radius, but you can choose the number of diaphragm blades, that you would have on your lens, and you can choose the type of blur. So this is a lens blur, but you can also have a motion blur in any direction that you'd like. Now, it only makes blurs, it doesn't correct motion blurs. It will increase or create motion blurs. And we have Gaussian blur, which is slightly different to lens blur. If you have a look at the idea between lens here and Gaussian blur, very different in look. So that is one new module. And the second one is the diffuse or sharpen. I think I'll get rid of the blurs there. Diffuse or sharpen is a huge, huge module. It is difficult to use, difficult to understand. We do thankfully have a lot of presets here. It will either diffuse, so blur the photo, make a bloom to the photo, if you will. If I add a radius span, there we are. I'm getting a bloom around the light there, so you can make blooms if you know what you're doing. If you want to sharpen the photo, I don't know if you'll see, you need to go the other way, and if I put a few iterations on that, see, that's too far, so you can actually break the photo. You can increase the edge sensitivity, lots of things that you could do. That it's a powerful module, so it will essentially, if I kind of do the dehaze is a very nice preset when I use a lot, and a lot. There we are. So we have before and after. So for the moment, it's quite subtly. I don't think you can really see what it's doing there, unless I zoom in. It's quite a high pixel photo, so it's a little bit slow there. 10 iterations. So that is with it on and off. Yes, the difference is subtle, but it is real. I'm sure you can see it on this petal here. It is a very, very good module, but it is complicated. So there are some sliders, if you move them, nothing will happen. I mean, you can move this one as much as you like. If that's the only one you're touching, then there's nothing happening, for example. So I will make a video on how to use this and how it actually works underneath. Well, the best I can, what I understand at least. For the moment, there are loads of presets you can use. Just be warned, it can be very slow. So if you choose, let's go on the Dehaze here. If you choose a preset that uses many iterations, that means that the module is repeating itself 10 times. That slows it down. So imagine you want to do the same thing 28 times here. It is very slow. So I would use this module at the end of your workflow, at the end of the pipeline, last thing you do. That's the one thing. See the difference. And if you want to mask, you've chosen the effect and you want to mask, I would suggest to move the number of iterations down to 1, make the mask, whatever you want to do. There we are, make a mask. And when you're happy with the mask, bump up the number of iterations up to the number you want. Otherwise, making the mask every time you want to change the mask, it works everything out again and it makes things really slow. So there we are, fabulous module, brilliant engineering, difficult to use though, and quite slow. And I do have OpenGL that is on, so I'm sure there are some of you out there which will find this quite unusable for the moment. We'll see how this module develops in the future, but no, I really like this. It's a big one. It is I think the biggest thing that happened in 3.8. A couple of other changes we have in the orientation. So orientation module, we now have some buttons here to flip the picture. We can flip it one way, flip vertically. Before we only had the rotation. I couldn't get it back by rotating twice. There we are. So we have that there. We're told that in the denoise module, the denoise, this profile denoise, it is automatically by default using the wavelets mode. There we are. And the default settings in this Y0, U0, V0 have been improved. So that is kind of under the engine there. We won't see a difference in the UI, but there we are. Just know that it has been improved. Another thing that has changed, small changes in the color picker on the left here. Color picker. So usually we'd target a color, and now we can see it in. Here we have the vector scope. So we can see exactly where it is if we pick a color. So that could be useful. And we can also target an area if we right click, and now we can target an average sample of colors. If you want to target the greens, and you can have an average. So before it was control click, now we can just left click, you choose a single target, right click, you choose an area. So that is an improvement to the interface. Now we also have some changes in the quick access panel. So this one here, which will reflect whether you've chosen the display or scene referred. And also if you go into the beginner workflow here, it will also reflect whether you've chosen. So here I've got filmic. I'm in scene referred, and normally I go to the light table preferences processing and go back to display referred. Now, normally, if I open this, I should have, maybe I have to discard the history. And now if I'm in display referred and I open this, I should see some differences. And there I have the base curve here instead of having filmic. So the beginner template here will, and here, the quick reference panel will reflect the style of editing you've chosen. I do recommend, though, for all those who are beginning or not sure what they're doing, I would really tell you to go for the scene referred instead of display referred, because it is the way forward. Display referred is what it was before. We're moving over to scene referred in linear RGB. The new modules are being written for that workflow. So unless you have good reasons not to, and I can understand you might, unless you have good reasons not to, go for the scene referred workflow. Okay, a couple of quick things now with the interface. If we're going to the preferences, there are two I'd like to show you. The first one in miscellaneous here is we can choose to have the scopes module. So the scopes module is the histogram or the vector scope. You can actually have it moved to the left, and a little white spot appears here because it's changed from the default. And there's another thing which is very interesting. Now, I didn't find this in the notes, but I'm sure it wasn't available in version 3.6, is in the dark room, right at the bottom, prompt for name on addition of new instance. Now that is the one most interesting and most used option. I think this is brilliant. It's so simple, but I've been using it all the time and I'm really pleased to have it. So two things there have changed. Let's have a look. Let's open this scene here. And now we have the vector scope here on the right. So we can go between vector scope and different types of histograms. So that is now on the left, sorry, instead of being on the right, which frees up some room. The module order here is now in the bottom line. It used to be kind of at the bottom of this panel here, taking up a bit of room on the modules, but now it's been moved down to the bottom line. I'm not quite sure what this is called anyway. Lined up, it saves space. There we are. And what did I click? I clicked something saying that if I make a new instance of a module, then I am prompted to make a name. So let's make a new instance of exposure. And now with the keyboard, let's say I just type in the name, type enter, and that so I don't have to click on rename. It will automatically go into the rename menu here. So there's two things. First of all, it saves time, and second of all, it makes you choose a name for every new instance on the module, because there's nothing worse than having exposure 1, exposure 2, exposure 3, exposure 4, and forgetting what they're all about. So that will force you to give a new name, and it's really quick. It's straight on the keyboard. You do new instance and type in new instance Azerty. Enter, and it's done, and you have them all lined up there. So that is really useful. And another thing I didn't mention while I was talking about the color picker is if I choose a color, let's say there, I have it. So let's record this one. Now if I right click on that color, I can select and I can copy these numbers and I can paste them now actually in the clipboard, and I can paste them in a text document in anything I like. So that's a useful thing to have. So if we get back to this scopes module just for a second, there are some more options that have been added. There are loads of options now. So if I'm in the vector scope, for instance, and I click on this wheel, I can set the view to UV, AZ, BZ, JZ, red, yellow, blue. You can hide some of the colors. On the waveform here, so we already had that linear logarithmic with the different channels. If we go to the parade now, the new option I think is we can set this one to vertical. So this how it works is we have the picture from left to right. All these are very different, and I don't use them all that extensively. But if I get it correctly, we have the picture from the left part of the picture, and here on the right hand side of the picture, and then we have the amount of reds, and we have clipping above this line here. And if we set it to vertical, then we have the top of the picture, the bottom of the picture, and then the amount of red or green or blue from left to right. So different ways to read the picture. I actually use the vector skill more and more. Anyway, we have loads of options. Explore those. So you can choose what displays you have, what color channels or luminous channels, and how it's all set out. So there we are, some new stuff in there too. Now some changes to the collections and recently used collections module. So now we can have a collection based on the star rating. If you want to make a collection, I can show you how this is used. Usually I would stay on film roll or folder, but if you want to make a search of your folders, you can now choose in the metadata the rating. Let's say choose your 5-star images, so double click on 5-star, and out of all those 5-star images that you have imported into your collection, you can go here and add a new rule, so narrow down search, which is an intersection, and just choose the red ones, and you can save a preset. You store a new preset for that, and there we are. That can help you narrow down the pictures in the important collections you have. You can also, in the recently used collections here, there's a new option which is in the preferences of the recently used collections, and you can choose how many collections there are stored there in the recently used ones. I think by default it's 10. I haven't changed it, but you could imagine that you only want to keep the 5 most recent ones, and that might make the module more useful. So that's for the collections. So another change in the UI is for the masking. So imagine that you have, now why am I in base curve? Oh, I remember why I'm in base curve. I need to discard the history and go back to the scene refer. There, I feel like. So imagine I would like a new instance of exposure and I want to have a gradient. Now you remember that if I shift click and go up, then the gradient gets tighter, and go down, it gets bigger. So down is bigger. And same thing if I have a circle, shift and mouse down, it gets bigger. Now if that annoys you, then you can go to, in the light table preferences, and in the dark room, and you have here scroll down to increase mask parameters. Click that on, and that changes the order. It changes the way that you scroll to make the mask bigger. I'll go back here and try. Now I realise you can't see me scrolling the mask, but now if I scroll down, it actually gets smaller. So that has inverse. So up is to get bigger. Maybe you think that's more logical. And anyway, that is an option that's now available. Now I'll just do a couple of quick ones to finish because this video is getting a bit long. And so if I go into, now if I want to have a LUT 3D, and if I add a LUT 3D, so I do have a few, let's add a black and white LUT. Now in the order of modules, it's now placed above filmic. There we are. I didn't say this, but the old crop module has been deprecated. So that's for the modules. Another little thing in the light table, if you reject, so click on R to reject, and now if you move away, it's kind of been dimmed. So unless you go over it with the mouse, but the rejected modules are now dimmed, so you can see them a little bit better. It's still not hugely visible. I mean, I wouldn't mind having a complete kind of something, a big cross over them, or a colour or something to see them a bit better. But that is an improvement in the UI. Okay, improvements to the tone equalizer. So this is a module that's not that easy to use. So the tone equalizer is here. There are some improvements that have been made to it. Now, I haven't explored these fully yet, but the automatic mask tuning has been improved. This is the automatic mask. That's been improved. And the new magic wand icons are now used for the auto-tune actions in the tone equalizer module. I'm reading that from the release notes. What I would do usually is use, these are the magic wands, use those, get a mask. Actually wouldn't do it for contrast normally. I'd only do it for the mask exposure compensation. So there have been improvements under the hood for this module. Now there are many more improvements, small improvements, some maybe that I've forgotten and that might be important to you. I do encourage you to go and have a look at all the release notes and read them quickly. Now we've been through them once, a lot of those will appear kind of easy to understand. Go and read them. And also I'd suggest you play around with this new release of 3.8. Enjoy yourselves anyway. This is the end of this video. Thanks to the developers, the testers, the people who built the final executables, so that we can all enjoy this new release of Darktable. Thanks to everyone, and I'll see you all soon.